This is my colleague Melissa DePillo on the call with us today.
Good morning, everyone.
We're both agents with Deland Gibson. It's an insurance agency in Wellesley. I'm a risk advisor and she's a client advocate. And between the two of us, we know quite a bit about cyber insurance. And our objective today is to talk to Cinch IT's clients in the Cinch webinar a little bit more about it. So today I'm going to dive into a lot of different topics regarding cyber insurance and its ever increasing threat. And pretty much just lay it out, because I find that a lot of people take a passive stance against it, and it's really becoming a more prominent threat than it was in the past. And before we get started on that, there's a couple of statistics I want to share about the industry. Melissa, would you mind flipping the slide? Apologies. Yeah, so one of the things that's really a concern with cyber insurance is the fact that it is an ever increasing threat. It's not tangible. A lot of people think that it's something that can be passively handled. But one of the things that I've been noticing in the trend is that in 2020, it's increased by about 40% cyber attacks on businesses. And one of the things that I hear a lot of times from business owners is, oh, it couldn't happen to me. That seems like it's basically everybody's first line of defense is that statement. Now, if you look at the second statistic there, 68% of cyber attacks are on small businesses with under 200 employees. And that's a pretty jarring figure to consider. And even more concerning than that is that 55% of businesses don't reopen after a cybersecurity breach. And that's not because they weren't insured. A lot of the times it's because their insurance wasn't tailored for their needs and they weren't poised to handle a threat. So today, as I'm working with Melissa, I'm going to go through a couple of the different ways that you can poise yourself to effectively mitigate that threat through proper planning and a cohesive bond with your insurance company. And by putting a proper plan together and working with your insurance company, you're also able to secure significant discounts because they're taking on a lot less risk when they have a client who's supported by someone like Cinch IT and is taking proactive measures to make sure that they're not going to be a victim of a cyber breach. The way that I really like to talk to people about cyber insurance is anecdotally, because, you know, obviously I could preach a million different ways about how you can be breached, but a lot of people don't realize that everyone really is at risk. And one of the interesting conversations I had most recently was actually with somebody who owned a business. He really thought that it was completely immune to that type of thing because of the nature of it. And I just wanted to talk it through with Melissa. It's going to be kind of like a role-playing exercise here where you can kind of hear what types of breaches can affect different businesses. So that'll be the next segment here. And just so everybody on the call knows, I'm a super casual guy. If you have any questions at all, just ping them in the group chat and I'll get to them pretty much immediately. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started with the interrogation here. And yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions about it. So Melissa.
Yes.
Okay. Would you be a gym owner for this segment?
That works.
Okay, cool enough. All right, so Melissa, you own a gym. How many locations do you have?
We have 7 throughout New England.
Very cool. So that's a pretty well-established gym. How many clients do you have?
Give or take 1,500.
Very cool. All right. So that's a well-established book as well of clients. Now, with these clients, are they just working out, or do you have personal trainers, dietitians, anything like that on the team?
We do offer a personal training program. Within each gym, I like to keep 8 to 9 personal trainers in each one.
Perfect. And what kind of information do you collect from your clients with these personal trainers? Is it just height and weight, or do you get pre-existing conditions, dietary restrictions, allergies?
We do tend to take a focus in the workouts and the personal training, but also in the dietary and health background.
Good. So it's a holistic approach, which is always nice because it really does require those two components to get somebody into peak physical shape. But one of the things when you're collecting that information about their dietary background, you're probably gathering a lot of sensitive information on those clients. And do you know where you store it? Do you know how it's protected?
They're stored in our servers.
Your servers?
Mm-hmm.
And what would your contingency be if the servers were breached?
I don't know. What would it be?
So this is a concern because, right, a gym owner, oh, it could never happen to me. These files have really, really critical information in about your clients. And you know, you could be federally surcharged if these files were to leak. And before the federal surcharge, you're certainly going to get a ransom call as well. And that's the type of thing that could really, really drive a business into the ground, because either of those two things aren't going to be covered by a basic insurance policy that hasn't really been assessed properly. A lot of insurance policies do have a cyber endorsement, but it's for $10,000. And if somebody steals, you know, a 100 or 200 people's personal information that could be constituted as, you know, a really personal file, they're not going to ask for $10,000 in ransom. And if you get federally fined for it, it's not going to cost less than $10,000 either. And that's just, a brick and mortar business that could be exposed to it that you wouldn't really think of. But it
bringing in brand new clients left and right, and say after a year and a half, you've had no problems with them. He wants to pursue employment elsewhere. No hard feelings.
Okay, that sounds fine. I'm never the type of person to stand in the way of what's best for them. So I would allow him to stay in my business until he's ready to leave. Sounds like he was doing a good job before.
So should it come to firing him, how would you do it?
I'd try to do it gently for sure. I would probably let him know that he's got as much time as he needs with me before he takes the next step. And again, no hard feelings. It doesn't seem like he's doing anything malicious, right?
Is your company working remotely?
Yeah, all of our producers work remotely.
And that's one thing we want to make sure with offboarding employees in the work from home environment.
Yeah.
They still have a numerous amount of tangible information on his clients that are now technically yours and the company as a whole.
Okay, so how could that go wrong? I mean, I don't care if he has information. Everyone knows his name too.
Your intellectual property is what drives your revenue.
Okay. So how could this come back to bite me though? I don't understand. I mean, the IP, of course, if there's some sort of secret that he shares with people.
Let's say he takes a thumb drive of all of his clients over to his new job.
Okay.
He starts recruiting his old clients to his new company. And one of them, is savvy enough, let's say, to say, what, this probably isn't within his rights of contract at that point.
Sure, okay, because he's got client information and he doesn't work for me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And having that logistical approach of just that thumb drive being in the hands of an ex-employee, you might as well call that a data breach.
I see, yeah, because that's a backdoor data breach. He didn't unauthorized, well, I guess it was unauthorized use, but I couldn't really have foreseen it. I mean, that's, I guess, why proper offboarding procedures are integral to a robust cyber insurance policy and plan to mitigate that type of loss. Now, one of the things that'll happen if you do experience that type of breach is you actually have a duty to notify. So say that this rogue employee calls, everybody in his book of business, and the book has two very litigious people on it. And those two both get the call, they speak with each other and decide to launch a class action against you because of the breached information. It doesn't matter that there was, a harmless just solicitation. I mean, obviously it's violating a non-compete, but it was just a solicitation. But once this breaks, you've got a duty to notify everybody. And there's a cost associated with that. And the cost isn't just the cost of sending the letters and emails. It's going to be your reputation. This is going to get published, especially if you're a prestigious financial advisory firm.
And Matt, one thing to add on to that, in terms of the cleanup that you mentioned, is if your company faces a breach, you want to be able to clean it up and clean it up ethically and morally, but you also want to maintain your day-to-day business objectives. You still want to be able to face uncertainty in that type of environment.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to have contingencies in place. Now, I'm sure that a lot of people do have these types of strategies in place, but what we want to make sure is that they're supported by insurance. Because what will happen is you're obviously going to have to beat your way out of the bag with the PR, and you can actually have insurance policies that will fund your PR. You can have insurance policies that will fund all of that, but you really need to look at it and examine it to understand that, and that's kind of where we're going to come in here. Yeah, could you flip this on, would you mind? So these are some statistics, and we were just talking about, how both of those scenarios we laid out were actually breaches for customer information. And as you can see by this graph, it is the number one thing that hackers are after because it's really exploitable. If you have certain customer information, you can get pretty much anything you want from the person who wants it back. So that's definitely one thing you want to consider. As you look at this, do you see anything in here that, is reminiscent of files you might be storing incorrectly? That you want to take another look at. That's really why we put that slide there, is to bring it to light, what happens and what's targeted in a breach. And I'm sure Melissa could speak a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, I think the irony of this chart is that no matter what business or industry you are in, these 6 or 7 different aspects of a business can more than likely apply to anybody. And earlier, as Matt had said, that cyber risk really isn't something you can run from. It just kind of brings it full circle in that a bakery is going to have employee records and a tech company is going to have employee records. They hold the same value.
Exactly. And as technology is progressing and people are understanding more about this threat, your duty to uphold this information in a safe way is increasing as well. And as you know, I've aforementioned, a lot of people just prefer to be passive about this, but really you're going to have ordinances in place that are going to force you to take an active stance on it. So it's a good idea to get in front of the curve early. That way you're on top of it when it's time for that. You know, your compliance will be in order. And the great thing is that right now it's not absolutely mandatory to have cyber insurance. So it's really, really cheap. When it becomes mandatory and when the industry is, you know, savvy to its losses, it's not going to be as cheap. It's been going up year after year. And after this whole COVID thing, it's going to increase substantially, because one of the trends that we're seeing is now, you know, a network isn't just held in one location. It can, you know, there's holes all over the place, because I'm with my laptop at my home in Woburn and the password to my Wi-Fi is very obvious. There's a lot of different ways that a company can be breached now, and there's no way to just pull the plug on it anymore because everyone's out there with their computers. So really, if there's ever a time to become savvy, it's yesterday. We should, you know, get on it pretty much ASAP. Missy, would you mind switching the slide? Thank you very much. So this kind of describes the different types of attacks. There's common ones and uncommon ones. And commonly you'll see phishing. Everyone sees that all the time. You'll see a web-based DNS attack. That stuff happens commonly too, but there's a lot that happens behind the scenes, and there's a lot more sophisticated and deliberate attacks that can really affect the business. And when somebody does deliberately attack a business, you know, they're stealing really pertinent information. You'd be a fool to think they're not about to download your insurance policy and look for exclusions in it. Because that is what a sophisticated hacker will do. They will download your insurance policy, figure out if it's a piece of garbage, and then once they understand that it is, then they know they've got you right where they want you. And that in itself is honestly very threatening, in my opinion. And Missy's got a lot of forensic intelligence as far as that goes, that I'm sure she would love to tell us about this slide.
Yeah, I was just going to say the ransomware attacks that I've seen just in the past 2 to 3 years have really just exploded in terms of creativity. And I think, I'm trying to think of a good example.
Sony had a movie stolen from them. That was kind of a creative snatch.
Yes, that one gets a little political, but yeah. in terms of the hack, Sony is a good example of not learning your lesson the first time. We'll keep it at that. Yeah,
that's based off of the headlines for sure. Sony doesn't ever really seem to learn their lesson. And luckily it hasn't put them out of business, but.
And I think one thing I wanted to point out too, on this previous slide, where customer records, intellectual property, credit and debit card information happen to be the top things that business owners are concerned about. If you look at the top 3 here, the web-based attack could be through a employee portal that you manage your payroll through, your HRIS system. Could be through corporate identity theft. If, say, your CEO's email gets hacked and you say it appears as though on your email you get a message from your CEO. Hey, Matt, I'm redoing our tax documents. Could you resend me your W-2? And then it gets sold on the black market and Matt gets calls from the IRS tomorrow.
Yep. And that actually is something I was almost subjected to. My very own bookkeeper emailed me a phishing email one time. So I'm sure everyone's seen one come in from a trusted contact that just didn't really seem right. And that's really something you got to watch out for. And as we've discussed, that's really a simple one. So I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg. It gets a lot more complicated than that. Now, when we were talking earlier about the policies and how they need to be tailored to you, there's a lot of different stuff that can be covered in an insurance policy, and cyber is a pretty broad word. And what I've basically detailed on this slide is all the different things that you want to look for when you're reading your policy contract, because, you know, a cybersecurity line of insurance for $50,000 is one thing, but like even this last one, Betterment, when you're replacing your equipment, they're going to give you, 100% of the cost it is to replace it. That's going to get you the same equipment that got you breached in the first place. So let's look at the Betterment Clause. Is it 100%? Is it 125%? You know, is this something that's going to fix the problem, or is this something that's just going to keep your head above water? There's a lot of different things to assess on this policy. Candidly, Melissa is the expert on all these terms, so I'm going to defer to her for a moment here.
Yeah, so in terms of the hardware replacement, cybersecurity and technology happen to be an industry where updates, you don't really have a choice. And when you have a breach, say that is, very detrimental to a business, the insurer has a self-interest in that company rebuilding their cybersecurity hygiene, if you will. So them only allotting 100% of what that company had for hardware within their network isn't really going to do much, as Matt said. It's not improving. Something within that 100% to start was already vulnerable and became vulnerable. And the velocity of the onset of that type of problem, if you don't fix it the first time, it'll only be larger and more detrimental to your business come the second time. So that's where I've seen involvement with cyber carriers, in that they've recognized that this 100% replacement isn't effective. That's why they've allotted the extra 25% for hardware replacements, whether it's updating your physical modem in your office or just plain laptops and devices with issued to your employees.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Is what you said, the first thing you said, a real insurance company is interested in seeing you protect yourself from the loss again. That's kind of where this thing comes full circle here, because insurance companies want to work cohesively with their client. When you have, basically when you buy insurance, it's your agent's job to narrate your risk to an underwriter. And underwriters are humans. They can discern what your rate's going to be based off of how good they feel about your risk. So if you've got an agent that thinks that your business is just a gym and doesn't ask these questions about personal trainers and what kind of files you're storing, that's a huge exposure for you, because you're not getting the best advice you can get from them. But it's also a problem for your insurer, because your insurer just sees this application come in. Oh, it's another gym. Oh, they want cybersecurity. Okay.
And now, just to add on to that, I have seen quite a number of carriers show significant pushback for companies. And I'll give you an example. One of our clients, it installs dryers and washers in apartment buildings. To
Sure.
any normal person, that
Yep.
seems like a relatively low risk. His niece created an app for his company so that you don't have to put quarters into the washer and the dryer. They have an app that you can just go in, click the machine that you want.
Yep.
And he had no cyber coverage.
Oh, wow.
So if you think about
Yes.
his app that, is in his business's name,
Yep.
that's also intaking payment information.
Sure. Definitely. More than that too. I mean, there's someone's schedule and their address and their GPS locator is probably on, and this guy's not got no security against it and no insurance against it. I mean, that's a huge concern, definitely. And of course, with apps, I mean, you definitely have to consider it, and really with everything you have to consider it. But back to the example with the gym is when your submission goes in, your insurance agent is responsible for narrating you to the underwriter and getting you a better rate and getting you a policy that's built for you. And if they don't really understand your business, they're probably not going to do an effective job with that. When I approach underwriters, I don't approach them with an application. I approach them with a portfolio, and the portfolio is going to have a lot of cyber contingency stuff in it. And that's going to secure you a more aggressive rate on cyber, and it's also going to show them what your operations are like, so that we can get you that 125% betterment. Or fulfilling the duty to notify. If I know that you have 3,000 clients, I don't want you to bear the burden of letting them all know. So we can get policy inclusions that are going to allow them to cover for that. If you're an HR, or if you're a financial advisory firm and you're prestigious, you're in Boston, you don't want to be published, we can also have a policy that supports PR intervention. But as your policy sits right now, I can almost guarantee it almost supports nothing besides just a blanket, $10,000 to $25,000, which is a huge concern, because that's in one field, which is cyber, and then there's a lot of other stuff that's a component in an insurance policy as well.
And the endorsements that I've seen on general liability business owners policies, aside from the fact that the point that you made, Matt, that the limit on these endorsements, I think the max I've seen on an endorsement is 50,000. Which is still not going to cover you for much thereafter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
not
much.
One thing that I find very interesting is within the cyber endorsements, they are very confined to computer hacking.
Yep.
Whereas there was a client at DG a couple of weeks ago who thought Eversource was calling him, asking him for a payment, and he voluntarily gave this person his payment information over the phone.
And that's not a hack, that's a phishing attempt.
Correct.
Yep.
And cyber policies have evolved to have a whole telephone hacking coverage.
Great.
So it's evolved to the creativity in terms of the cyber criminals, how I had mentioned earlier, how the attacks are getting creative and more sophisticated, so are the policies.
Good. And that's, it's important because it's not a set and forget product. I don't think insurance ever should have been a set and forget product, except for maybe when houses were made out of stone and the only concern is the weather. But now that society is moving at such a rapid pace, you need an insurance agent that's not like asleep at the switch. This is the type of stuff that needs to be stayed up on, and cyber is just like really at the forefront of that. It's honestly the tip of the sword because of the fact that it is getting so much more dangerous day after day. So, I mean, it's really what I've diverted my focus to for a lot of my clients. I like to assess physical risks, but this one is taking the cake now because of the fact that it's got such a high propensity to run a business into the ground. Melissa, would you actually flip back one slide?
Sure. All
right, so these two figures on the left are averages. That's not the national total. That $800,000 or $900,000 figure, that's an average for if a cyber breach affects a business. And as we said, 68% of them are small businesses. So I don't know, can your small business float $1 million with $10,000 of coverage or $50,000 of coverage? It's very unlikely that that's something that's recoverable. So it really, really is important to assess this type of stuff when you're looking at your policy because of the fact that it's such an unforeseen threat. It's just like, it's not what you'd expect. It's not like you can throw water on it like a fire. You know what I mean? At least we're familiar with fire. It's been around since the dawn of time. This is something that's been around since like 2011. So yeah, it's definitely good to have someone who's in your corner on this type of thing.
I think one thing to point out when it comes to any topics, not even with cyber insurance, but cybersecurity and just the internet and on very basic levels, just protecting our own personal information. The route of going about it in terms of fear, I don't always find to be the most effective thing. From the insurance standpoint, yes, it is scary to see some of these numbers, but at the end of the day, you have someone who cares enough about these numbers to let you know about them so you don't become that statistic.
Exactly. And it seems like if you're on this webinar, you're probably in that right headspace because you hired Cinch, presumably. And honestly, I mean, I work with Cinch clients and I love them because of the fact that I know that their bases are covered. I know Cinch does everything they can to make sure that no one ends up in court, not them, not their client. Yeah, just bring it back. And then, yeah, so honestly, that's the bulk of the subject matter today. And I know Rick got a couple of pre-submitted questions that we'd probably like to dive into. And if anyone else has questions, I invite you definitely to ask them now. And we can talk through pretty much, anything because you've got both me and Melissa here, great resources for this type of thing.
Fire away.
Yeah, perfect, Matt. Thank you. And Melissa, thank you very much. Melissa, if you want to stop sharing your screen for just a second, we'll get the full view of everybody that's on here today. So, first off, I just want to thank everybody who joined us today. This has definitely been a hot topic that we get questions for regularly. We also get the annual security audits that your insurance company does with you guys. You guys oftentimes submit those over to us so that we can help you guys fill out the technology portions. And one of the biggest questions we get all the time is how can we save money on cybersecurity and policies, plus put the right things in place and stuff like that. So I think the first general question before we dive into the questions that we do have is, how do we answer that question best, Matt or Melissa, when customers are looking for ways to save money on their cybersecurity policy? Is there a best practice or a strategy to do that?
The number one way to save significant money and get lasting discounts on your insurance policy is to have an agent that really understands how to articulate your business. It's really the best thing you can do for yourself. Because like I said, when you give a submission to an insurance carrier, a lot of agents just, they just fill out the application and answer every question on it. If you have an agent that puts together a portfolio that really describes your risk mitigation practices and describes the fact that you're with someone like Cinch IT and you didn't hire a $40,000 college grad for all of your IT needs, that looks so incredibly good. It makes you look like an incredible risk. It makes people want to work with you. And this is the type of thing that motivates insurers. So instead of begging them for a rate, oh, come on, can you do 10% less? They're like, let's just floor it because we want this customer. That is the best way to save money on insurance. Everyone's been there, solicited by an agent. Oh yeah, I could save you 10% a year on your insurance. And everyone's seen that discount disappear after the year because it's an introductory discount because one underwriter just wanted to score some business. What we want to do is motivate these underwriters. We want to get them competitive with each other. And the way we do that is by making you look like the top risk, like, such a good bet. And that really is the number one thing you can do for yourself is just hire a passionate, high aptitude insurance agent that's going to be able to articulate you and tell your story with a very compelling narrative.
Got it. Perfect. We do have, I have 4 questions that were actually submitted by people prior to the webinar. I can go through those. But for everybody else who is in here, feel free to jump into the chat and send us a question. Again, just a reminder, this is a Cinch Series webinar. We do this once every quarter for Cinch IT clients only. We do allow and admit a couple others that are here. But for the most part, they are all Cinch IT clients. So feel free to write it in. It's a small, safe group to be able to ask your questions. And you guys all work with the same IT company. And so you're probably dealing with a lot of the same scenarios and situations and technologies and stuff like that. So the first question I got, Melissa or Matt, whoever wants to field, the first one says, does my general liability have any cyber coverage whatsoever?
Melissa, I'll take care of this one.
It depends. A lot of the general liability policies that have a cyber endorsement on it don't have much freedom with what they cover. They have the 4 or 5 exclusions on this one little endorsement are probably the 4 or 5 things that are more than likely causing it.
Okay.
That'll, get the claim denied anyways. Now, the other side of that is the more claims general liability carriers began to get in terms of cyber coverage, it became almost routine at that point for insureds to say, okay, well, if this isn't going to cover me for anything, what will? And that's kind of the gist, I think, the beginning anyways, of how cyber insurance started becoming a little bit more routine.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you. Next question we had was, if a breach occurs, how does that affect my premium? Is it like auto insurance? When you get a speeding ticket, your premium goes up? How does that work?
That's a good question. So when you file a claim under any business policy, you can expect it to show up on your loss record. And that's assessed it's basically a letter of experience. It's passed around year by year to insurer. And that loss record is going to be a determination of what your rate should be for the next year. Now, tying it back to the first question, if you file a big claim against your general liability, that's really, really bad on your record. Now, if you file a claim against your cyber liability, that's totally different, and that can be assessed individually. So it will affect your premium, but it's very likely it's only going to affect it for that portion of your policy. And as you saw on page 4 with the averages, $800,000 to $950,000, I guarantee your premium increase will be a lot less than that. Yeah. Realistically, when you see a premium increase because of a claim, it's really like 30 to 40%, and it falls off after about 5 years. So it will, like auto insurance, increase your premium on that portion of the policy, but the premium increase is always, even with the smallest breach, going to be a lot less than what the cost of the breach itself was and the cleanup.
Got it. So if we do file a cybersecurity claim and we have a separate cyber policy on top of the general liability, when the year comes for renewal, in theory, the general liability will remain the same or go whatever through incremental it does, but that won't increase. Just the cyber portion will most likely increase.
No, insurance companies can realistically do anything they want upon renewal, but they're going to assess it as it is. They're not going to see $1 million liability claim. They're going to probably see, like a $250,000, $300,000 cyber claim, and that's going to really adversely affect your cyber rates, which are a very small fraction of your policy.
Got it.
You might see a small increase in your GL, but I don't think your GL is going to double as a result of that.
Okay.
And I would say 2 things on top of that when it comes time for renewal. Following a year where you submitted a claim, 2 things that you could leverage here in terms of what can help you, what you've done since, and how you've been measuring the success of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We've seen that ourselves, where we bring on a new client who just suffered a breach right before they came on with us, and their insurance company says, here's all the stuff you need to do to remedy, make sure this doesn't happen again, and we're usually implementing all of those pieces. So we have seen that.
And going back to the auto analogy, it's a little bit different in that if I bump up the driver's door of my car and I go get it fixed, I can physically show that to my carrier and they say, okay, it's fixed. A little bit more difficult after a breach to prove that, okay, I'm clean, I'm safe, secure, because the reality of it is, unfortunately, once you experience a breach, you're always at that heightened scrutiny.
Sure.
For the second time.
Yep. Okay. The next question we have, are there any types of incidents that are specifically excluded from cybersecurity coverage?
That's a great question. As I said, that coverage is growing, and Melissa said too, it grows year after year. It gets more and more sophisticated because hackers are getting a lot more creative and sophisticated as well. And I know for a fact that Melissa's just working on like a little thesis about it, so I'll let her answer this question in its entirety.
Yeah, so one thing I always found pretty interesting is, say there was some sort of core internet infrastructure outage, let's say caused the city of Boston internet outage to go down, that would be excluded from your policy.
Okay.
So obviously with that happening, opens up a lot of vulnerabilities and kind of knocks down a lot of preventative measures and things you put in place to keep your information locked down and secure. If the internet were to go out, so does all of your security. And if that were to happen and your company were to experience a breach, say for a rogue satellite, goes down, your cyber insurance carrier would not cover that claim. And you think about that in a spread of risk mentality, in that, say, the whole city of New York went down. Think of all of the businesses that could possibly be affected by that. That could make the reserve claim go way up.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Is there anything? So this is not part of that question, but I'm going to try to add on to it just to make sure that we answered it. Is there anything that a business owner should be concerned about, or measures they put in place focused around what is excluded? In other words, if something is excluded from cyber, is there additional measures we should be putting in place?
I think that you should definitely plan for that way, and that's really what comes into a robust cybersecurity program, is having that type of deflection for things that aren't covered by your policy. So with policies, insurance policies, a lot of times they're exclusion-based. So you can look at the list of exclusions, and we can come up with a remedy for each one. So say employee dishonesty is an exclusion. We'll definitely work on your offboarding methods, and we'll make sure that you have a protocol set up where you can shut off a computer as soon as you get notice that the employee might be doing something shady.
Okay.
And that's the type of stuff that is going to be able to mitigate that type of loss if it's not covered by your insurance. But that's not a direct example. We'll always be able to get that covered by your insurance. But as the policies progress and things are covered, things are decided they're not covered, we're going to be putting in pragmatic processes all along the way to make sure that there's nothing that really goes wrong with the business. Because, like I said, I mean, it's got to be a robust strategy. It cannot be a set and forget insurance plan, and honestly, it can't just be, 2015. Oh, don't click this link. Okay, yeah, sure. There's more to it than that, though.
Makes sense. That actually leads into a question that I actually wrote down during your presentation. I wrote down how, when it comes to the coverages evolution, right? There's new threats, new hacks, new malware that comes out daily, and new strategies, right? Social engineering, you mentioned a version of that earlier. I signed a policy in the beginning of 2020, let's say, right? We're almost a year later. Does the policy, if there's new threats and new changes and new evolution in those threats, are those covered, or are they immediately excluded and maybe included only at renewal?
That's an awesome question too, Rick. I appreciate that one. And this goes way back to when I first took my commercial insurance test. if there's ever an amendment that's made to a policy that's positive on the policyholder side, it's immediately extended to all the policyholders from the year of inception prior. So you will get to take advantage of your carrier's improvements, even if they're not written in your policy language. As long as that is their standard policy form that they're shipping out to people, you're going to get it as well when it comes time to file a claim. But really, they are trying to stay on top of it. And like I said, a lot of policies are exclusion-based. I implore you to take a look at yours and see if it's exclusion-based or named peril, which would mean like hacks. You know what I mean? Named peril would just be what's covered. Exclusion-based would have to say specifically it's excluded. Otherwise, it's included. And this is the reason that I actually thought Melissa would be so interested in these questions, is because she's been interviewing carriers to bring onto the agency that are exclusion based, because we really want to have carriers that are on the hook for everything. Yeah. That's, we don't want to have any policies that have major exclusions or ambiguous exclusions. We want to have carriers for cyber insurance that include everything, because we do want them to foot the bill.
And one thing I want to add on to that is, in kind of vetting a couple different carriers the past few months, one of the things that I've began to prioritize a little bit more and more isn't necessarily the body of the coverages or the exclusions. It's the stuff that comes with the resources and the tools that come with cyber liability policies, including for the smaller businesses who may not have these resources of their own, a incident response plan, interactive trainings for your employees. And Rick, earlier when you had said kind of building that culture around the exclusions, these interactive trainings that essentially are coming from your carrier, they wouldn't train, or they wouldn't heighten your awareness on something that they exclude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they have a self-interest in your company and your employees doing these trainings as well.
Makes sense.
And honestly, I mean, these are elementary courses compared to the stuff Cinch is capable of training people up on, but it does give you an indicator of how interested the company is in seeing the best for everybody, because they do offer these things for free. And it's kind of a cool resource. A lot of people don't realize this, but when you pay an insurance policy, actually 20% of it goes as commission to the agent, and you should expect a resource out of that person, because if you do the math,
that's a really good point. So we have a couple different support packages at Cinch, and one of them we do call Secure, and it does come with that weekly training. But in all honesty, I don't think I've ever heard of a company that said, yeah, I get trainings from my cybersecurity provider or from my cybersecurity insurance provider. I've never heard that before. So very few people are taking advantage of that.
Yeah, I think it plays a lot into the cost of big cyber breaches going through the roof.
Yep.
And that carriers, in proof is in the pudding, are even now starting to heighten the awareness of their own insureds to basically subliminally say, let's just make you as aware as possible, because the insurance industry can't forever manage these large claims forever.
Well, it's because
minimize their risk as well.
Yeah, exactly. They're so frequent, and they're just almost, really, for a company that's disinterested, it's unavoidable. I mean, if a hacker wants a disinterested company, they'll just take it. They don't even, there's nothing you can do about it if you're not paying attention. And that's why insurance companies want to get you involved. I actually took one of the classes when we got a carrier last year. I like to say that I did good on it, but I did not. One of the questions was, your lead engineer calls you in the middle of the night and says data is being drained from the server. What's your option? And I was like, drive to the building and unplug it. And then they're like, well, that's how you destroy the crime scene. And I was like, oh my God, I'm the #1 suspect.
Late at night, don't answer your phone. That's the answer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, leave it on.
We have one more question that came in pre, and then Steven sent one in. We got a couple others that came in. So pre-submitted question, last one. That's very specific. If a hacker successfully assesses a company's email and orders the bookkeeper to transfer funds to a third-party account, which we've actually seen many times, and one of the main reasons why some companies have actually started using us, does cybersecurity insurance cover the loss of the stolen funds?
Great question. Melissa?
Yes.
Yes, they do?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
short and easy answer. One, but I have seen a number of policies with that coverage.
Okay.
And what Matt and I have accentuated, you want to focus on the coverages that you as a business owner are most concerned about.
Okay.
If you're not worried about regulatory fines, then don't focus on finding the coverage for them. If you're more so worried about the HR lady accidentally sending your electric payment to a hacker, then focus on the funds transfer fraud.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. That's actually good to know. We've seen that multiple times. Like I said, as clients come aboard with us, they tell us, hey, here's the reason why we're switching to your IT company. We had a wire transfer fraud. We wired out $250,000 plus. I've heard more. We had to contact the FBI. Nothing happened there. It went nowhere. And now we're working with our insurance company. So that's good to know. Question that we got today, kind of related to that, is how does the coverage, after reporting a cybersecurity attack, how quickly does the provider respond? So I think those two kind of go hand in hand. So if you have a $250,000 wire fraud scam, how quickly does the provider respond?
That's such a good question. Can I answer a part of it? I know you're itching to. But
go for it.
So when policies first started coming out with cyber, as we said, they were really rudimentary. It wasn't really a very well understood risk. So they all had like a 72, 48, sometimes a 1 week waiting period, and they were hemorrhaging money by waiting a week. So now we see policies coming out day after day that are shorter and shorter. And Melissa actually saw the other day that had a 12-hour waiting period on it. And
even after that, I saw one with 8.
So it's getting quicker and quicker because people realize that while this door is open, everyone's running into it.
Okay.
So it's kind of cool because, like I said, these carriers are realizing that they are going to start paying way more than they need to if they don't get their act together. And that is why we're seeing lower and lower response times, which is awesome.
Got it. Yeah.
So thank you for that question.
That is great. One of the questions we got was, what factors of the business or IT should be in place to help business owners lower their premium? Is there any type of security measures or technology that need to be in place that could help lower that premium?
Yep. Just because you guys are on the seminar with Cinch, that is huge. The fact that you have a managed IT service with actual professionals there is huge for lowering your premium. You can call your agent, tell him that, see what he says, see what he says, see if he's interested to hear it. And if he's not interested to hear it, give me a call, because I can narrate that in such an effective way, and it gets such great results on my end. And I see that as the number one thing. I love working with Cinch clients because I know it's going to be so cheap to write their insurance because of the fact that they present themselves as such a great risk because they've spent the money to hire professionals to manage something that they don't know much about. And really, that's one of the big things you can do to prove to insurance companies you're worth a discount is by showing them, look, like we've got all these engineers over at Cinch. They set up our entire infrastructure. You can come check it out yourself. Additionally, we've got all these protocols in place. Here's our offboarding procedure. Speak with our insurance agent. Ask him. All that stuff all comes together to make you seem like an A+ submission. And that's what really gets you a discount. People think discounts come from having multiple policies. I mean, yeah, you do get a discount that way, but the real lasting discounts, the ones that make people competitive about you, are the ones that come from, within, the ones that you are eligible for because of the fact that you're a great risk. Okay. And yeah, point blank, having a managed IT provider that's reputable like Cinch, that is such a leverage point when you're shopping for insurance.
As I look through the name of people registered and stuff like that, a vast majority of them, when their annual security survey comes out, they're forwarding it over to us. We're helping fill out that technology piece. So, we're checking the box to, if not every single one of them, almost every single one of them that they have. Yeah,
definitely. I implore you guys. Call your agent, ask him or her if they can maybe leverage a discount on your behalf. Because candidly, like I said, 20% of your premium goes to them as commission. And if you're not really getting that, back in the form of service, then it should be a concern because of the fact that that your interest should be their interest. And if your interest is saving money on insurance, they should definitely facilitate that for you, especially because you gave them every reason to.
Perfect.
Yeah. So
I have one last question, I think, and then I think we answered them all. This one is a controversial one.
Oh yeah.
I probably have a different response than you guys, but
sure.
Certainly we'll see. But it says, if data is being held ransom, so I'm assuming they're talking about ransomware, right? Should the business owner pay off the hacker?
Oh, good question.
I bet you we're going to have different answers. Let's see. What should they pay off the hacker?
Yeah, for me, it depends on the situation. But Melissa, what's your assessment?
So this is a loaded question. The more I learn about cybersecurity. So formally, the FBI always encourages to not pay the ransomware. Absolutely not. The other part of a ransomware attack is a lot of insurance, cyber liability insurance policies cover your ransomware payment. Now, one thing to be aware of is October 1st, 2020, there was an OFAC sanction that came out that basically explained that any people, entity, organization that pays a ransomware to a blacklisted cybercrime group, which we don't know which ones they are, we never will.
Yep.
They can actually get fined.
Wow.
For paying it.
I did not know that.
The far reach in what I'm subliminally getting at here is, if this sticks around, insurance carriers may have to rid of that coverage within their policy forms for the fear of, one, getting fined, and for the fear of, two, if you're paying this ransomware on behalf of your insured, a lot of ransomware attacks nowadays have already exfiltrated and duplicated your entire network by the time you're even contemplating paying them.
Yep. Gotcha. So I'll throw in my 2 cents here. I think this is a difficult question. I think for a lot of business owners, I actually get this question quite a bit, and so does most of the staff here, if they've ever been in this situation or clients coming over to us. I think it's two-part, and I agree with you, Melissa. I think it really depends on the situation. So, one, if you have a good backup and disaster recovery strategy, the answer is absolutely not. You have absolutely no reason to pay that hacker. Simply recover from your backup and identify how you believe they got in, remedy that situation, right? So if you have a good backup and disaster recovery, you should never, ever have to pay that fine. I have been in situations, and I know of many business owners that have been in situations that have paid it because they did not have a backup and disaster recovery strategy. And the truth is, they got all their data back. They got it back quickly. They got it back fairly affordably, certainly in the early days of ransomware. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that ransomware is a business. And so if they hold your data hostage and you pay them and they don't unencrypt that information, who's ever going to pay again? So they're actually I've never heard of a case where they didn't decrypt your information. So you can get your information back. Long-term remedies, situations, right? Do they have access to do it again? Do they have access to, did they already steal your information? There's a lot of other things that go into that. But I think, what the FBI recommends as not makes perfect sense. I completely understand why that new sanction was put in place in October, right? They're trying to make sure that, the only way to combat these things from stopping altogether is make sure they can't make money at this anymore, because it is a business.
And there's also a part of it too, in a way that kind of incentivizes it by paying it, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, from a technology standpoint, not an insurance standpoint, the answer is have a good backup and disaster recovery program. So you never even have to ask yourself this question. It's an easy no-brainer. Absolutely not. Recover.
And this is what comes back to getting a lower insurance premium.
Yeah.
The fact that you've got Rick as an advisor and Melissa as an advisor, making sure that the insurance company won't have to pay it. You won't have to pay it either. You're not going to have any business interruption, and that's going to make you a better risk overall. And that's exactly how you secure better discounts.
Yep.
We can even take that one step closer and say, we can heighten the awareness and give you the tools to hopefully not even put you in that position.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's all the questions. I'll wrap it up here. If anybody has any last minute questions and want to throw it into the chat box, go ahead. But I think we got to all of them today. Melissa, Matt, thank you very much for jumping on, sharing that information with us. Something we get questions about all the time. For everybody who's on the call today, I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much for joining us on another Cinch Series webinar. Talk to your account manager if there's ever a topic that you would like discussed. Every quarter we do something totally different. We bring in experts like Matt, like Melissa, to talk about them so that you don't have to hear from us all the time. Earlier this year, we did one that was very good, all about the PPP program when it first came out, and everybody had millions of questions about it. So if there's anything timely or useful to make your business more successful, let your account manager know. We're happy to reach out to contacts, bring them in, and put something even better together for you every single quarter as we improve on this and try to find ways to make you more successful. So Matt, Melissa, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick. It's been
Very
a pleasure.
welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for everyone for tuning in. If anyone ever wants to reach out, it'll be very evident how to do so after this meeting.
Yeah, and exactly. We'll share out all of your contact information as well with everybody that was here today and everybody who registered.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Happy to be a resource for one of Rick's people. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Rick. I very much appreciate it. I hope you have an awesome day.
You guys too. Have a good day, everyone.
Hey, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.